Waitress rushes to save a billionaire who collapsed. Later, he returns with a surprise. Rain hammered against the diner windows like 1,000 tiny drums as the night crept into silence. Most customers had already left, but Emily Carter, the 27-year-old waitress working the late shift, refused to clock out. Her shoes squelched with every step across the wet floor as she refilled a coffee pot, just in case one last traveler needed warmth. That's when it happened. A tall man in an expensive charcoal suit staggered through the door, drenched and gasping for air. His hand clutched his chest before his legs gave out completely. Cups shattered, and Emily dropped everything, rushing to his side. "Sir! Hey, can you hear me?" she cried, pressing her hands on his chest as the world blurred around her. She didn't know it then, but the man lying unconscious on the diner floor wasn't just anyone. He was Alexander Grant, one of the most powerful billionaires in America. The clock above the counter read 11:47 p.m. when the sound of rain turned heavier, drumming relentlessly against the diner's old glass windows. The night shift at Silver Creek Diner was always quiet this late, just the hum of a coffee machine, the flicker of a neon sign outside, and the occasional truck rumbling past on the wet highway. Emily Carter, a 27-year-old waitress with tired eyes and kind hands, wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time. Her worn-out sneakers squeaked softly on the linoleum floor. She loved her job, but nights like these, cold, rainy, and empty, always made her wonder if life would ever change. The bell above the diner door jingled weakly, its sound almost drowned by the storm outside. A tall man stumbled in, drenched from head to toe. His suit clung to him, water dripping onto the tiled floor. Emily looked up, startled. "Sir? We're about to close in 10 minutes, but you can still sit down. Let me get you a towel and some coffee." The man didn't answer. His face was pale, almost gray, and his breathing sounded strange, shallow. He took a step forward, clutching his chest. Emily noticed the sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold rain. "Sir? Are you all right?" she asked, stepping closer. He tried to speak, but could only gasp. "See chest pain." Before she could react, he collapsed, his body hitting the floor with a thud that echoed through the empty diner. Emily froze for a split second, her heart skipping a beat. Then instinct took over. "Sam, call 911, she screamed to the line cook behind the counter. Her hands shook as she knelt beside the man. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, unfocused. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. The pulse was there, but weak and fading. She remembered the CPR training she'd learned years ago at a community center and began chest compressions. Her arms trembled, but she kept pushing. "Come on, sir, please don't do this. Stay with me." The man's head rolled slightly, his breathing uneven. Emily's voice cracked as she yelled toward the kitchen. "Did you call them?" Sam stammered. "Why, yeah, they're on their way." "But Emily, do you know who that is?" She didn't stop pressing on his chest. "I don't care who he is. He's dying." That's Alexander Grant. The billionaire. The guy from Grant Industries. Emily blinked but didn't lose focus. The name sounded familiar. She'd seen him once on the news, donating millions to some foundation. But at that moment, none of it mattered. To her, he was just a human being fighting for breath. She tilted his head back, listening for air. Nothing. "Come on," she cried, starting rescue breaths, then returning to compressions. Her tears mixed with rain dripping from her hair as the thunder cracked outside. Minutes felt like hours until finally, the wail of sirens pierced through the storm. The door burst open, and 2 paramedics rushed in. "We got it from here," one shouted, kneeling beside Emily. She moved back, trembling, her hands covered in rain and coffee stains. One paramedic checked Alexander's pulse and nodded. "It's faint, but he's still with us. You did good, miss. Real good." As they lifted the unconscious billionaire onto a stretcher, Emily stood there, her chest rising and falling rapidly, watching as they disappeared into the storm. The last thing she saw was the ambulance lights fading into the distance. Then came the silence. Her hands were numb, her uniform soaked. Sam brought her a towel, his face pale. "You okay, Em?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah. I just hope he'll be okay." The next morning, she returned to work early, exhausted. Her manager, Mr. Doyle, stood by the counter with a sour expression. "You broke 3 mugs and cracked the coffee pot last night," he said, holding out a notepad. "That's coming out of your paycheck." Emily looked down, biting her lip. "Someone almost died, sir." "Aye." He waved her off. Yeah. Just don't make a habit of it. She sighed, quietly tying her apron. That was life for her. Doing the right thing didn't pay the bills. Hours later, as the breakfast crowd thinned, Sam turned the TV up. The morning news anchor's voice filled the diner. Breaking news. Billionaire and philanthropist Alexander Grant suffered a sudden cardiac episode late last night at a roadside diner on Highway 71. Thanks to a quick-acting waitress, his life was saved before emergency crews arrived. Emily froze mid-step, the coffee pot trembling in her hands. The screen showed a picture of the same man she performed CPR on, the man she thought she'd never see again. Sam grinned. "Emily, that's you. You saved Alexander Grant." She blushed, shaking her head. "I didn't save a billionaire, Sam. I saved a person." That night, as the diner closed once more and rain began to fall again, Emily sat by the window, watching droplets race down the glass. Her reflection looked tired, but somehow lighter. She whispered softly, "I hope he's okay." Outside, the storm rolled on, quietly carrying the secret of one woman's courage and one man's second chance. What Emily didn't know was that somewhere across town, in a hospital room surrounded by silence, Alexander Grant's heart monitor beeped steadily back to life, and when he opened his eyes, the first words he murmured were, "Find her." The rhythmic beeping of machines was the first sound Alexander Grant heard when consciousness returned. His throat felt dry, his chest ached with every shallow breath, and the sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air. When he tried to move, a soft voice stopped him. "Easy, Mr. Grant," said a nurse, adjusting his four. "You're in St. Vincent's Hospital. You had a heart attack." Alexander blinked, confused. His memories were a blur: rain, headlights, a diner, the faint smell of coffee, and then darkness. He swallowed painfully. "How long have I been here?" 3 days, the nurse replied gently. "But you're lucky. Someone at that diner started CPR before we arrived. Without her, you wouldn't have made it." Her words hung in the air. "Someone at that diner." Alexander frowned. "Who was it?" The nurse smiled. "A waitress. She refused to stop until the ambulance came." He stared at the ceiling, the fluorescent lights blurring into white streaks. For a man who'd built an empire of steel and glass, skyscrapers that reached the clouds, it was humbling, almost surreal, to know that his life had been saved not by his doctors or his wealth, but by a stranger in a diner. 2 days later, his assistant, James Holloway, entered the hospital suite carrying a laptop and folders. "Sir, the board is asking for updates on the merger." Alexander raised a hand weakly. "Not now, James. I just want quiet." "But Mr. Grant, the press." "Tell them I'm fine. That's all they need to know." James hesitated. "Understood." After the assistant left, Alexander stared out the window. The city he ruled from his penthouse now looked different, small, distant. He thought about the waitress. Her face was fuzzy in his memory, but her voice echoed clearly in his mind. "Please don't die on me." She hadn't seen a billionaire that night. She'd seen a man fighting for his life. That thought stirred something deep within him, an ache not in his chest, but in his heart. When James returned the next morning, Alexander was sitting up, pale but determined. "I want you to find her," he said. "Sir." "The woman from the diner. The one who saved me." James frowned slightly. "We don't know her name." There was no statement, just that she worked at some roadside place called Silver Creek. "Then start there," Alexander said firmly. "And don't stop until you do." Across town, Emily Carter's life went on as usual. Long hours, aching feet, and endless bills. The newspaper headline that morning read, "Billionaire Alexander Grant stable after near-fatal heart attack." She glanced at it briefly before sliding a plate of pancakes to a customer. "Good for him," she murmured under her breath. She didn't expect thanks, fame, or reward. She'd done what she hoped anyone would have done. Still, the image of that man haunted her, the limp weight of his body, the way his pulse fluttered like a fading candle flame beneath her fingers. She had nightmares sometimes, waking up thinking she hadn't pressed hard enough. That afternoon, she visited her mother at the small apartment they shared. Her mom's oxygen machine hummed quietly beside the bed. "Sweetheart, you look tired," her mother whispered. "You've been working every night again." Emily smiled weakly. "Just trying to keep up. Rent's due soon, and we still need your meds." Her mother's frail hand reached out, squeezing hers. "You've got the heart of an angel, Emily. Don't let this world harden you." Emily's eyes stung with tears. "I'll be fine, Mom. Promise." But deep down, she was running on fumes. 1 week later, the calm of the afternoon shift shattered when a sleek black Mercedes pulled up in front of the diner. Its glossy finish looked almost alien against the chipped paint and flickering neon of Silver Creek Diner. Sam, flipping burgers in the kitchen, peeked through the window. Whoa! Did someone order the Mafia special? Emily laughed softly. Probably lost. No one fancy comes here. Moments later, the bell above the door chimed, and 2 men in sharp suits stepped inside. Their shoes clicked on the floor, echoing through the small space. Conversations died mid-sentence. Sam muttered, should I hide the cash register? One of the men, tall and professional, spoke calmly. We're looking for Emily Carter. Her heart skipped. That's me, she said cautiously. He gave a polite nod. Miss Carter, Mr. Alexander Grant wishes to meet you. He asked us to bring you to him personally. The room went completely silent. Forks paused mid-air, eyes darting between the waitress and the suited men. Sam whispered, Wait, the Alexander Grant. Emily's mind raced. Why would a billionaire want to see her? There must be some mistake, she said nervously. I'm just a waitress. No mistake, ma'am, the man replied. He insisted. Her boss emerged from the back, his expression unreadable. Emily, you'd better go. Don't keep a man like that waiting. She untied her apron slowly, her hands trembling. Every eye in the diner followed her as she walked out into the rain toward the black car. As the door closed behind her, Sam leaned against the counter and exhaled. Either she's about to get fired by a billionaire or her whole life's about to change. He didn't know it yet, but it was the latter. Inside the car, Emily stared out the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Her thoughts spun like a storm. Why would he want to see me? Did I do something wrong? Maybe he just wants to say thank you, or maybe he's angry. I didn't wait for his staff to help. Her nerves tangled tighter with every passing mile until the driver finally turned off the highway. When the car stopped in front of a towering glass skyscraper bearing a silver logo, Grant Industries, Emily realized the truth. This wasn't a simple thank you visit. This was the beginning of something far bigger than she could imagine. Emily's heart pounded like a drum in her chest as the sleek black car glided to a stop in front of Grant Industries Tower. The glass skyscraper loomed above her, its mirrored surface reflecting the late afternoon sun, making the entire city skyline look surreal. She stepped out, her sneakers squelching against the marble driveway. This was a world so different from her small diner and modest apartment that for a moment she wondered if she had stepped into someone else's dream. Inside the lobby, her shoes echoed on the polished floors. Massive chandeliers hung like clusters of stars, their lights scattering across the walls in a soft glow. Staff in crisp uniforms moved around efficiently, glancing at her curiously. Emily felt the familiar knot of nervousness tighten in her stomach. She clutched her purse tighter. She wasn't a visitor here. She was just a waitress, a small-town girl in a billionaire's world. A young assistant approached. "Follow me, please. Mr. Grant is expecting you." Emily nodded, trying to steady her racing thoughts as the elevator doors closed. The ride to the top floor felt like it lasted forever, each beep of the control panel echoing in her mind. What am I doing here? Did I do something wrong? When the elevator opened, Emily stepped out into a floor so expansive it took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, the streets tiny and winding like toy roads. And there, by the glass, stood Alexander Grant himself. He was taller than she remembered, but not intimidating. His presence was calm, magnetic. His dark eyes softened as they met hers. "You must be Emily," he said, his voice deep but gentle, carrying a warmth that immediately eased some of her tension. Emily's throat went dry. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to cause trouble that night," she stammered, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. He shook his head slowly, a small, understanding smile tugging at his lips. "Trouble? Emily, you saved my life. That's not trouble, that's courage." Her cheeks warmed, and she looked down at her worn sneakers. "I just did what anyone would have done," she whispered. "No," he said firmly. "Most people would have frozen. Most people would have called for help and waited, watching someone slip away. You acted. You cared. That's rare in this world." For a moment, the hum of the city below disappeared. Time seemed suspended as they stood facing each other, two lives bound by a single, fragile thread of fate. Emily could feel the weight of his words, a recognition she had never expected. This man, someone whose life was measured in billions, valued her not for what she could give him, but for what she had given freely, without expectation. Alexander's eyes softened further, and small smile formed. "How can I ever repay you?" he asked almost shyly, as if unsure what could possibly balance the debt of life itself. Emily hesitated. Her voice was soft, tinged with disbelief. You don't need to. I'm just glad you're okay. That's enough for me." Her humility struck him deeply. He had met thousands of people in his life, all striving for power, influence, or attention. But Emily? She wanted nothing. Her courage and selflessness weren't transactional, they were pure. A gentle silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken gratitude and mutual respect. Then he spoke again, quieter this time, almost a whisper. "You'll hear from me again." Emily blinked, unsure how to respond. "Okay," she said softly, feeling a mixture of awe and confusion. She turned to leave, her legs unsteady, the surreal grandeur of the room suddenly pressing on her. As she walked back to the elevator, she tried to process what had just happened. Her life had been ordinary before that night, long shifts, bills, small joys, but now something had shifted. A spark of possibility had entered her world, the kind of possibility that felt terrifying and exciting all at once. When Emily returned to the diner, her co-workers crowded around her. Sam practically bounced on the tips of his feet. "What did he say? Did he give you a check? A car? Tell us everything." Emily smiled, shaking her head. "No, just thank you," she replied quietly, tucking the memory of the billionaire's gaze into her chest like a secret treasure. But even as she returned to her routine, pouring coffee, clearing plates, and greeting customers, she could sense a subtle shift. Her world felt bigger, lighter, and more meaningful. And somewhere across town, Alexander Grant, sitting in his high-rise office, looked at the skyline differently. He wasn't thinking of stock charts or board meetings. He was thinking of Emily, her courage, her humanity, and the simple truth that wealth could never replace: genuine kindness. In that quiet, unspoken exchange between a waitress and a billionaire, two worlds had collided, leaving behind something neither had expected: a new perspective on life, and the promise of something extraordinary yet to come. Weeks passed since Emily's meeting with Alexander Grant, and life at the diner settled into its familiar rhythm: long hours, endless customers, and the hum of the coffee machine. But outside the walls of Silver Creek Diner, Emily's personal life was becoming increasingly difficult. Her mother's health had taken a turn for the worse, and the mounting hospital bills felt like a storm threatening to drown them. Every day, Emily juggled shifts, household chores, and calls to insurance companies, all while trying to keep her younger brother's school tuition on track. She had already sold her car, skipped meals, and borrowed from co-workers to make ends meet, but she carried on with a determined smile, even when exhaustion clawed at her. One rainy morning, as Emily was wiping down a table, a sharp voice broke through the diner's usual chatter. "Emily, you've got mail." She looked up, startled. Mr. Doyle, the diner manager, was holding an envelope with an unusual sheen. It wasn't the standard delivery she was used to. This envelope was thick, almost heavy, embossed with golden lettering that read, "Grant and Associates." Emily's hands trembled as she took the envelope from him. "From Mr. Grant," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mr. Doyle nodded, a mix of curiosity and unease on his face. "Looks official. Don't tear it open here. You might want to read it privately." She nodded, retreating to the small office in the back. Her heart raced as she carefully slid the envelope open. Inside was a single letter, crisp and elegantly written. She unfolded it, and the words on the page made her eyes widen and her breath catch. "Dear Ms. Carter, you once gave me back my life. Allow me now to make yours a little easier. A trust fund has been established in your name to cover your mother's medical expenses and your brother's education. No repayment required. Alexander Grant." Tears sprang to her eyes, and she pressed the letter to her chest, trembling. He actually remembered," she whispered, her voice breaking. For a moment, she simply sat there, overwhelmed. The weight of her constant struggle, the late-night shifts, the unpaid bills, the worry for her mother's health, suddenly felt lighter, almost impossible to believe. Alexander Grant, the man whose life she had saved, had done more than just offer thanks. He had given her the freedom to breathe, to care for her family, without fear of financial ruin. As Emily sat absorbing the news, a knock at the diner door startled her. She opened it to see contractors moving in quietly, setting up equipment. Over the next few hours, she watched in disbelief as men carried in stacks of polished wood, new tables, and chairs. The old, worn linoleum was replaced with gleaming tiles. Lights were installed that made the diner sparkle, reflecting the raindrops outside like tiny diamonds. Mr. Doyle, who had been observing from the side, could barely speak. "What's happening here?" he stammered. A plaque, adorned with gold lettering, was placed prominently at the entrance. Emily walked up to it, reading aloud in disbelief. "In honor of Emily Carter, whose kindness saved a life and inspired a change." Her hands shook as she touched the plaque, tears rolling down her cheeks. The staff gathered around her, cheering and clapping, but she could barely form words. He did all this for me," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. Sam, the line cook, came over and placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. "Emily, you didn't just save him. You reminded everyone what being human means. That's why this is happening." Emily nodded, overwhelmed by gratitude and disbelief. She thought of her mother resting at home, of the endless nights of worry, of the countless sacrifices she had made, without complaint. And now, because of a simple act of courage, her world had been transformed. The diner, once a modest roadside spot, now shone like a place of possibility. Customers walked in with wide eyes, noticing the gleaming floors, sparkling tables, and the warmth that seemed to radiate from the walls themselves. Emily moved among them, serving coffee with her usual smile, but this time it carried a new weight, a sense that her small acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways she had never imagined. That night, as she locked up the diner and stepped out into the crisp air, Emily paused and looked up at the stars. Her chest felt lighter than it had in months, and she whispered to herself, "Thank you for believing in me." Somewhere in the city, Alexander Grant sat in his office, looking at a photo of her that James had discreetly sent. He allowed himself a small smile. He had given her a gift, but in truth, he felt it was he who had received the greater one, a lesson in courage, selflessness, and the power of a human heart. Emily's life had changed forever, not because of money or fame, but because one act of compassion had sparked a chain of hope, gratitude, and transformation that neither she nor Alexander could have ever predicted. A month had passed since the renovation of Silver Creek Diner, and Emily had begun adjusting to the subtle yet profound changes in her life. Her mother's health was stable, her brother's tuition secured, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of relief she hadn't thought possible. The diner buzzed with life, drawing in more customers than ever before, and Emily found herself smiling genuinely, serving coffee and pancakes with a renewed energy. It was mid-morning when the familiar rumble of a luxury black car pulled up in front of the diner. Emily glanced up from wiping the counter, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the man himself step out casually. No entourage, no security detail, no ostentatious suit, just Alexander Grant, walking toward the diner with a warm, approachable smile. Time seemed to slow. Her hands froze mid-motion, the coffee pot in her grip trembling slightly. She stared, half in disbelief. "He's really here," she whispered under her breath. The bell above the door chimed softly as he stepped inside. Customers turned to look, whispers spreading through the diner like a gentle breeze. Alexander's eyes found Emily's immediately, and he nodded, as if greeting an old friend. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice calm, carrying the same warmth she remembered from their first encounter. Emily's throat went dry, and she managed a shaky nod. "Of course. I mean, you didn't have to do all that for me." Her words were barely audible, tinged with awe and gratitude. He smiled, a soft, genuine curve of lips that made the worries of the past month suddenly seem distant. "I didn't do it out of obligation, Emily. You reminded me what matters. After my heart attack, my doctors told me I needed to slow down and maybe start living." Emily felt her chest tighten, emotions swirling within her. She had only acted out of instinct, yet here was a man, one of the wealthiest people in the country, telling her that her actions had changed his life. He looked around the diner, taking in the renovated space, the gleaming tables, and the laughter of customers. "This diner, it feels alive now. Feels like hope." Emily laughed through tears, the sound raw and freeing. "Hope and a lot of coffee," she said, gesturing at the busy tables around them. He chuckled, a sound that seemed to carry both warmth and relief. "Best combination there is," he replied, his eyes softening as they met hers. For a moment, silence enveloped them. It wasn't awkward, it was comforting. Emily felt the weight of the past few weeks lift, replaced by a strange and beautiful certainty that this moment, this connection, was genuine. As he stood to leave, he reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. Emily's hands trembled as she accepted it, curiosity mingling with apprehension. She opened it carefully and pulled out a simple card. The words were handwritten in elegant script. "I'd like you to manage the new community cafe we're building downtown. It'll offer jobs to people who need a second chance. You're the kind of heart this city needs." Emily's hands shook, the card fluttering slightly in her grasp. She looked up at him, disbelief and hope warring in her eyes. "Me? But I'm just a waitress." Alexander shook his head, his smile gentle but firm. "No, Emily. You're a lifesaver in every way that counts. Not just for me, but for everyone whose life you touch. This cafe isn't just about jobs. It's about giving people a chance to start over, to find hope. And you're the person who can make that happen." Tears blurred Emily's vision. She had always wanted to do more for her community, but life struggles had kept her grounded, barely able to manage her own family. Now here was a chance, not just for herself, but for countless others. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice quivering. This is more than I ever imagined." Alexander placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll lead it with the same heart and courage that saved me." Emily nodded, swallowing hard as her emotions threatened to overwhelm her. "I promise," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tears. He gave her one final smile before stepping toward the door. "You've changed more than one life, Emily. Remember that. And keep spreading that kindness. It's the only thing that truly matters." As he walked out into the sunlight, Emily stood rooted to the spot, the envelope clutched tightly to her chest. Around her, the diner continued its lively rhythm, coffee steaming, laughter echoing, and life moving forward. But now, she felt a new sense of purpose, a burning hope that would guide her through every challenge. This was more than a gift of money or opportunity. It was a gift of trust, recognition, and belief. Alexander had not just returned to thank her, he had returned to empower her to make a difference. And Emily, once an ordinary waitress, now carried within her the extraordinary chance to change the lives of others, one cup of coffee and one act of kindness at a time. And in that moment, Emily realized that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or deeds. It was measured in hearts touched, lives saved, and hope given freely. The morning of the grand opening of the Second Chance Cafe arrived bright and clear, a gentle sunlight spilling across the streets as if celebrating the day itself. The cafe, a transformed version of what had once been a small, ordinary space, now stood as a beacon of hope for the entire community. Fresh flowers lined the entrance, colorful banners fluttered in the wind, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries beckoned from the open doors. A large banner above the entrance read, "Founded in honor of kindness that changes lives." Emily stood behind the counter, her hands shaking slightly as she adjusted the name tag pinned to her chest. Manager, Emily Carter. She had spent the past weeks overseeing every detail, ensuring that the cafe was not just a business, but a sanctuary. Her mother sat in the front row of the small crowd gathered outside, her frail hands clasped together, her eyes gleaming with pride. The sight of her mother healthy and smiling filled Emily's chest with warmth she hadn't felt in years. The crowd began to gather, locals, media, and people from the city who had heard of the unique cafe funded and inspired by the billionaire who had been saved by a simple act of kindness. As Emily adjusted her apron, she caught sight of Alexander Grant stepping up to the small podium. The man who had once relied on her courage to survive now stood ready to honor her in front of everyone. He cleared his throat, and the chatter of the crowd faded into a hush. His voice was steady and commanding, yet soft with sincerity. "I once thought success was about wealth and power," he began. "But a waitress showed me that true success is the ability to care. Emily reminded me that compassion doesn't just save lives, it rebuilds them. And today we celebrate not money, not fame, but the human heart that chooses to act, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is unnoticed. Emily's courage saved my life. And now, through this cafe, it will save the lives of countless others." Applause erupted, filling the room with energy and emotion. Emily's eyes glistened as she watched people smile, nod, and clap, not just for the billionaire, but for her, the quiet hero who had acted without thought of reward. She stepped forward, her voice soft but carrying over the crowd. "I didn't save him because he was a billionaire. I saved him because he was human. That's something we all can do. Save each other, one small act at a time. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks as she looked at the crowd, at her mother, at the employees she had recruited and trained for the cafe, many of whom were young adults seeking a second chance. Each person there represented someone who had once struggled, who had once felt unseen. And now, together, they were part of something bigger. Confetti began to flutter down from the ceiling, sparkling in the sunlight, streaming through the windows. Children squealed in delight, customers laughed, and the smell of coffee and baked bread mingled with the scent of fresh flowers, creating a sense of warmth and life that could be felt in the very air. Alexander stepped closer to Emily as the applause died down, leaning toward her so that only she could hear. "You gave me back more than life, Emily," he whispered. "You gave me purpose." Emily's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Then I guess we saved each other," she replied, her voice full of quiet triumph and joy. The cafe quickly became more than just a place to eat and drink. It became a symbol of second chances. Strangers came and left as friends. People who had lost hope in their own potential found guidance, mentorship, and the chance to rebuild their lives. Emily moved among them, offering smiles, advice, and the same warmth that had once saved Alexander Grant. By evening, the sunlight had faded, and the cafe glowed softly in the warm light of lamps and pendant lights. Outside, rain began to fall gently, mirroring the night when Emily had first saved the billionaire. Alexander and Emily stood together by the window, watching the reflection of people laughing, sipping coffee, and sharing stories. The rain traced patterns on the glass, and in that quiet, reflective moment, both understood something profound, that humanity, when shared freely, is the greatest wealth of all. Emily whispered, almost to herself, "This is what it's all about: kindness, care, hope." Alexander nodded, his hand brushing lightly against hers in a gesture of silent acknowledgement. No words were needed. They both knew that lives had been changed not by wealth, not by fame, but by courage, compassion, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. And as the night settled over the city, the cafe's light shone brightly into the darkness, a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of a single act of humanity, and a reminder that even the smallest kindness can create ripples that transform lives forever. In that warm glow, with the rain falling outside and laughter inside, Emily and Alexander watched the world they had touched together, knowing that some gifts, like courage, love, and hope, were far greater than anything money could buy. The story of a waitress and a billionaire, of a single heroic act and a life transformed, had found its heart, and it would live on in every cup of coffee, every smile, and every life touched by the spirit of giving.